I'm Natalie Parker, 27, a software engineer who worked for everything I have. My sister Victoria, 25, still in her third graduate program, just got a Bentley from our parents. A $200,000 Bentley Continental GT, while I drive a Toyota I saved 3 years for. She needs this car and you earn your own, Mom said with that dismissive wave. Dad wouldn't even look me in the eye. It's always been this way, but they don't know what I've discovered about Victoria's perfect life. Soon, they'll get a call that changes everything. Before I dive into this wild story about family favoritism gone wrong, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Have you ever felt like the less favored child? Hit that like button if you can relate, and subscribe to catch more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one unfolds. Growing up with Victoria always felt like living in a shadow. From our earliest childhood memories, the pattern was clear. I was the responsible one, while Victoria was the special one, who needed extra attention, extra care, extra everything. Our parents never said it outright, but their actions spoke volumes. When I was 12 and Victoria was 10, Mom and Dad established the routine of me babysitting my sister whenever they went out. Not only was I never compensated for this responsibility, but I was also lectured extensively if Victoria complained about anything during their absence. She's sensitive, Mom would explain, as if I wasn't. The stark contrast between our birthday celebrations still stings when I think about it. My 16th birthday was acknowledged with a small family dinner and a practical gift, SAT prep books. 2 years later, Victoria's Sweet 16 featured a rented venue, professional DJ, catered food, and a designer dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe. Dad explained the discrepancy with a casual, "You were always more low-key, Natalie." Perhaps the most painful memory was when my parents missed my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, scheduled to give a speech I'd worked on for weeks. The night before, Victoria announced her dance recital had been rescheduled to the same time. There was no discussion. Mom simply said, "Victoria needs us there for support. You understand, right?" I gave my speech to an audience with 2 empty seats in the family section. While most teenagers in my affluent suburb received cars for their birthdays or had their insurance covered, I started working part-time at 16, saving every dollar. By 18, I had earned a full academic scholarship to the state university, the only way I could afford higher education since my parents had been setting aside college funds that mysteriously seemed available only for Victoria's private university tuition. College meant freedom, but also struggle. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, eating ramen while building my coding portfolio late into the night. My roommates partied while I interned at a local tech startup, which eventually led to an entry-level position upon graduation. The next 5 years were a blur of 70-hour work weeks, learning new programming languages on weekends, and slowly climbing the corporate ladder. Each promotion came from merit, not connections or handouts. Now, at 27, I've finally secured a position at a prestigious tech firm, with a salary that allows me to live comfortably, if modestly. Victoria's path couldn't have been more different. She attended an exclusive private school where her mediocre grades were deemed just her learning style. Her expensive horseback riding lessons were developing her character, according to Dad. After high school, she spent 4 years at an exclusive private college, changing majors 3 times. First art history, I'm really passionate about Renaissance painters. Then psychology, I want to understand people deeply, and finally communications, it's more practical for networking. After graduation, Victoria announced she needed more education. Our parents nodded supportively and funded her first master's program, then a second. Now she's in an MBA program that she's totally passionate about this time. In between academic ventures, Victoria has held several jobs, none lasting longer than 3 months. Each departure came with a different excuse. The environment wasn't nurturing, the boss didn't recognize her potential, or the company lacked vision. The pattern of preferential treatment extended to every holiday and special occasion. Last Christmas, Victoria received designer clothes, jewelry, and electronics. My gift was a professional planner and a set of kitchen knives. Practical gifts for our practical girl, Mom said, as if it were a compliment rather than an acknowledgement that they put little thought into what might bring me joy. The disparities continued into adulthood. Victoria lives in a luxury apartment, rent paid by our parents. She takes international vacations funded by their credit cards. Meanwhile, when I asked for their help refinancing my student loans to a lower interest rate, not even asking them to pay the loans, just co-sign, Dad explained they needed to maintain financial flexibility for emergencies. Victoria's emergency Botox apparently qualified. Last week, I met my best friend Samantha at our favorite coffee shop to vent about the latest development. The small cafe, with mismatched furniture and excellent espresso, has been our meeting spot since college. A Bentley? Are you kidding me? Samantha nearly spilled her latte when I told her. That's not just favoritism, Nat. That's delusional. I stirred my coffee absently. I know. I keep wondering if I should try family therapy again. Maybe with a different therapist. The last one told your parents they were creating harmful dynamics, and they never went back, Samantha reminded me. Maybe it's time to create some distance instead. For your mental health. I nodded, knowing she was right but feeling that familiar pull of family obligation. It's hard. They're still my parents. Parents who buy one child a Bentley and the other nothing, Samantha pointed out. That's not normal or healthy. Later that evening, I discussed the situation with my boyfriend Jason. Unlike me, Jason comes from a family where support and resources were distributed equally among siblings. His perspective as an outsider to my family dynamics has been invaluable. Your parents' behavior isn't a reflection of your worth, Jason said, squeezing my hand across the dinner table in my apartment. It's a reflection of their own issues. I know that logically, I admitted. But emotionally, it still feels like I'm not enough. You're more than enough, Jason assured me. Maybe it's time to set clearer boundaries. You can love your family without subjecting yourself to constant reminders of their favoritism. Jason suggested a weekend getaway to help clear my head. Let's drive up to the mountains. No family drama, no work stress. Just us hiking trails and that little bed and breakfast you liked. His suggestion was tempting, an escape from the latest reminder that, in my parents' eyes, Victoria would always be the priority. What still burns in my memory is the calculated way the whole Bentley reveal played out. It started with a seemingly innocent text from Mom. Family dinner this Friday. Dad's grilling steaks. Nothing unusual there. Our monthly family dinners had been a tradition since I moved out. When I arrived at my parents' suburban home, Victoria's smirk should have been my first clue. Throughout the appetizers, she kept checking her phone and exchanging knowing glances with our parents. Mom seemed unusually enthusiastic, refreshing everyone's drinks before they were half empty and laughing too loudly at Dad's tired jokes. How's the new project going? Dad asked me over dinner, but his attention was clearly elsewhere, his eyes darting to his watch every few minutes. It's challenging but interesting. I began explaining the machine learning algorithm I was developing, only to notice that no one was listening. Victoria was texting under the table, and Mom was practically vibrating with excitement. As soon as we finished dessert, a store-bought cheesecake for which Victoria received compliments as if she'd baked it herself, Dad cleared his throat. Let's step outside for a minute. We have a little surprise. The spring evening was mild, the suburban street quiet except for the chirping of crickets. And there it was in the driveway, a gleaming Bentley Continental GT in British racing green with a massive red bow on the hood. The sticker price of over $200,000 flashed to my mind, approximately 4 times my annual salary.
Surprise, sweetheart.
Mom exclaimed, handing Victoria a set of keys with the Bentley logo. We know how hard you've been working on your MBA. Victoria's reaction was theatrical, gasping with her hands over her mouth, then jumping up and down before hugging our parents. Oh my God. I can't believe it. It's exactly what I wanted. How did you know? Dad beamed with pride. Only the best for our girl. This will make the right impression when you're meeting with business contacts. I stood frozen, my nails digging into my palms as I maintained a neutral expression. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Victoria's hard work on a degree she hadn't completed versus my years of actual professional accomplishments that had never warranted even a fraction of this recognition. Natalie, isn't it gorgeous? Mom turned to me, apparently remembering my existence. It's certainly expensive, I managed, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. That's when Mom delivered the line that would echo in my head for days. Victoria needs this car for her career networking, and you earn your own way. You've always been so independent. She gave that dismissive wave I'd seen thousands of times, the gesture that minimized my feelings while simultaneously praising me for not having needs. Dad couldn't even look me in the eye, suddenly very interested in explaining the car's horsepower specifications to Victoria, who clearly didn't care about anything beyond the luxury brand name. Take your sister for a spin, Mom suggested, but Victoria was already sliding into the driver's seat. Rain check? I promised to meet some classmates to celebrate our project grade. Victoria lied smoothly. We all knew there was no project, no classmates waiting. I made my excuses shortly after, claiming an early meeting the next day. The drive home in my Toyota Corolla, a reliable car I'd saved for 3 years to purchase, was a blur of streetlights and swallowed tears. Entering my modest one-bedroom apartment was when the dam finally broke. The contrast between my life and Victoria's had never been so stark. My furniture was a mix of IKEA and Facebook Marketplace finds. My splurge was a decent coffee maker and a comfortable mattress. Meanwhile, Victoria's apartment featured designer furniture, a wine fridge, and now a parking space that would hold a Bentley. I sank to the floor, back against the door, and finally let the tears flow. My body shook with sobs as years of maintained composure crumbled. I'd worked so hard for my education, my career, my independence, always believing that eventually my parents would see my value. The Bentley wasn't just a car, it was confirmation that nothing I achieved would ever be enough. After 20 minutes of crying, I pulled out old photo albums, searching for evidence that there had been a time when things were equal. Had I misremembered my childhood? Was I exaggerating the disparities? But the photographic evidence only confirmed my memories. Victoria center stage at family events, my parents gazing adoringly at her while I stood slightly apart, often literally in the background. I called Jason, my voice still thick with tears. They bought her a Bentley. 30 minutes later, he was at my door with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant and a patient ear. As we sat on my worn couch, I poured out decades of hurt. It's not even about the car, I explained, pushing rice around my plate. It's what it represents. They've never seen me, Jason. Never valued my accomplishments or supported my dreams the way they do hers. That sounds like emotional abuse, Jason said quietly. Consistent favoritism is a form of neglect toward the other child. The crazy thing is, I still want their approval, I admitted. How pathetic is that? Jason took my hand. It's not pathetic. It's human. We all want our parents' love and recognition. As painful as the Bentley incident was, it also opened my eyes to something concerning. Victoria's social media had recently featured items even beyond what our parents would buy: a Chanel handbag collection, weekend trips to Aspen, dining at restaurants where entrees cost hundreds. Her MBA program was expensive, but not give her disposable income expensive. Something wasn't adding up. Victoria had also been hanging around with a new crowd, sleek, polished people with vague job descriptions like consultant or entrepreneur. When I'd asked about one particularly flashy friend at a family dinner, Victoria had become defensive. Marcus is in import-export. Not everyone needs to code all day in a cubicle, she'd snapped, though I'd never mention my job. There were other red flags. Victoria taking phone calls in hushed tones, stepping outside when her phone rang during family gatherings, vague references to investments that were supposedly paying off. When I'd expressed curiosity about these successful investments, hoping to make some smart financial moves myself, Victoria had shut down the conversation. It's all about networking and knowing the right people, she'd said dismissively. You wouldn't understand with your technical mindset. After the Bentley incident, I made a decision that was both difficult and liberating. I started declining the weekly family dinners. The first time, Mom's response was telling. Oh, well, More leftovers for us then. No attempt to reschedule. No concern about missing time together. Victoria's reaction came in the form of taunting texts. Missing out on mom's pot roast. But I guess you're busy with your little computer projects. Attached was always a photo of her at the family dinner table, our parents smiling proudly beside her. I threw myself into a major work project, a welcome distraction from family dynamics. I also started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, Dr. Levine, who helped me understand that the family patterns weren't my fault and that setting boundaries was healthy, not selfish. Your value isn't determined by your parents' ability to see it, Dr. Levine reminded me during sessions. And you're allowed to protect yourself from situations that consistently hurt you. I began building stronger connections with my chosen family, friends like Samantha, colleagues who appreciated my contributions, and Jason, whose unwavering support showed me what healthy love looked like. The catalyst for my investigation came unexpectedly on a Tuesday evening. Jason and I were celebrating his promotion with dinner at Ellison's, an upscale restaurant downtown that required reservations weeks in advance. We had just ordered appetizers when I spotted Victoria across the dimly lit restaurant, seated in a private alcove with 3 men in expensive suits. This was unusual for several reasons. First, Victoria complained about Ellison's being stuffy and boring whenever I mentioned liking it. Second, she was supposed to be at a study group according to what she'd told our parents. Third, the men she was with didn't match her typical social circle of fashionable MBA students. "I'll be right back," I murmured to Jason, making my way to the restroom, which providentially required passing near Victoria's table. As I approached, Victoria's eyes widened in panic when she spotted me. She quickly rearranged her expression into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Natalie." What a coincidence. Her voice was too bright, too loud. I smiled pleasantly. "Just having dinner with Jason. Are these classmates from your MBA program?" I directed the question to the table generally. The oldest man, with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that screamed money, gave me a calculating look. "Business associates. Victoria is helping us with some logistics." Before I could ask for clarification, Victoria stood abruptly. "Let me walk you to the restroom, sis. Catch up a bit." Once we were out of earshot, Victoria's friendly facade vanished. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Eating dinner, like normal people do at restaurants," I replied calmly. "Who are those men?"
Networking contact.
Some of us have to build connections to succeed, not just stare at screens all day. I was about to respond when I heard one of the men at Victoria's table say clearly, "The deliveries need to be coordinated better. We need clean money by Friday." Victoria noticed my expression and practically pushed me toward the restroom. "Don't spy on my business meetings. It's pathetic how jealous you are of my success." As I returned to Jason, my mind was racing. Victoria's lifestyle had always been extravagant thanks to our parents, but lately, it had escalated beyond even their generosity. The Chanel bags, the front-row concert tickets, the weekend trips to luxury resorts, it all added up to far more than what our parents provided, and certainly more than an MBA student with no job should be able to afford. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jason commented as I slid back into my seat. "Not a ghost. Just my sister with some very interesting business associates discussing clean money." That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and began what would become a methodical investigation. I created a spreadsheet listing Victoria's known income sources, our parents' allowance, against her visible expenses based on social media posts and family conversations. The discrepancy was significant and growing. I'm not proud of my next move, but concern outweighed my ethical qualms. Using skills I developed for cybersecurity projects at work, I located Victoria's digital footprint across platforms. She wasn't particularly careful with her online security, using the same password, our childhood dog's name plus her birth year, for multiple accounts. What I discovered was troubling. Victoria had a second Instagram account where she posted more freely, showing parties with those same business associates, stacks of cash displayed casually on hotel beds, and cryptic captions about making moves and the hustle paying off. More concerning was evidence that Victoria had a second phone. bills for which occasionally appeared in our parents' mail that I'd seen while visiting. This level of operational security seemed extreme for an MBA student. Using public records and social media cross-referencing, I identified two of the men from the restaurant. One, Marcus Delgado, had been investigated twice for money laundering but never charged. The other, Raymond Keller, had connections to a real estate company that had been fined for financial irregularities. The pattern was becoming clearer. Victoria's travel schedule, which she documented extensively online, corresponded with cash deposits into an account she'd opened 6 months ago. The cities she visited for MBA networking events were the same cities where Delgado and Keller had property holdings or business interests. As the evidence mounted, I faced a moral dilemma that kept me awake night after night. Victoria was my sister, despite our complicated relationship. Did family loyalty require me to confront her privately first? What if our parents were somehow involved or at risk? What if Victoria was being manipulated or threatened? I met Samantha at our coffee shop to talk through my concerns. If what you suspect is true, this is serious criminal activity, Samantha said, keeping her voice low despite the cafe's ambient noise. Money laundering carries heavy penalties. I know, I sighed, turning my coffee cup in circles. But she's still my sister. And our parents could be implicated if she's using their information or accounts. What's your evidence beyond the restaurant conversation and social media posts? Samantha asked, always the practical one. It's circumstantial right now, I admitted, but compelling when you see the pattern. Maybe talk to someone with legal background before making any decisions? Samantha suggested. Your old professor, Dr. Harrison, taught white-collar crime law, right? That afternoon, I met with Dr. Harrison under the guise of seeking career advice. After catching up, I presented a hypothetical situation involving a family member potentially involved in money laundering. Hypothetically speaking, Dr. Harrison said with a knowing look, your first loyalty should be to the law and to protecting innocent parties who might be harmed. Family dynamics complicate things, but financial crimes aren't victimless. And if parents might be unwittingly involved, all the more reason to address it before they face legal consequences for someone else's actions. Dr. Harrison's eyes were kind but serious. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is prevent them from continuing down a destructive path. Armed with this perspective, I doubled down on gathering concrete evidence. I began photographing Victoria's meetings with her suspicious contacts, using a telephoto lens attachment for my phone from across streets or through cafe windows. At the next family dinner I attended, I recorded the conversation on my phone, asking carefully crafted questions about Victoria's business connections and recent travels. Her answers were vague and contradictory, and I noticed our parents seemed to accept her explanations without question, grateful for any crumbs of information she offered about her life. Using traffic camera footage I could access through a work project, I tracked the Bentley's movements, noting patterns of stops at storage facilities, certain bank branches, and meetings in parking garages rather than office buildings or restaurants where legitimate business would typically occur. I meticulously documented a timeline of Victoria's activities, cross-referenced with her known associates' movements. I researched their backgrounds extensively, finding connections to previous financial crimes and shell companies with suspicious transaction patterns. To protect myself, I created secure backups of all evidence on encrypted drives stored in locations only I knew about. If Victoria discovered my investigation, I needed to ensure the evidence wouldn't disappear. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Victoria wasn't just spending our parents' money. She had found a much more lucrative and dangerous source of income. And the brand new Bentley, I was beginning to suspect, wasn't just an extravagant gift but potentially a tool in whatever operation she was running. 3 weeks into my investigation, I decided to follow Victoria directly. On a Wednesday evening when she had told our parents she was attending a networking mixer, I parked near her apartment and waited. At 8:37 p.m., the Bentley emerged from the garage, Victoria behind the wheel wearing dark sunglasses despite the evening hour. I maintained a careful distance, thankful for my nondescript Toyota that wouldn't stand out in traffic. Victoria drove to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, eventually pulling into the parking garage of an office building that appeared mostly empty at this hour. Parking across the street, I used my phone's camera zoom to watch as Victoria met with Marcus Delgado and another man I didn't recognize. They popped the Bentley's trunk, and the unknown man placed a duffel bag inside. The exchange took less than 3 minutes before Victoria was driving away again. Her next stop was even more concerning. She parked behind an upscale hotel and entered through a service entrance. 20 minutes later, she emerged without the duffel bag, but carrying a sleek briefcase that hadn't been with her before. When Victoria stopped at a gas station, I seized the opportunity to get closer. Pretending to check air in my tires at the adjacent pump, I glimpsed inside the Bentley's window. The briefcase lay open on the passenger seat, revealing stacks of cash that Victoria was casually counting, seemingly unconcerned about being observed in the well-lit station. I ducked down when Victoria looked up, narrowly avoiding discovery. She closed the briefcase, refueled the Bentley, and drove directly home, unaware of my continued surveillance. The next day, I texted Victoria, "Need to talk. A coffee at your place this afternoon?" To my surprise, she agreed readily. Victoria's luxury apartment was exactly as I expected. Minimalist, expensive furniture, abstract art that matched her Instagram aesthetic, and the subtle scent of a candle that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Nice place," I commented, accepting the artisanal coffee she offered. "Business must be good." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "What do you want to talk about, Natalie? I have plans later." I decided on a direct approach. "I saw you at Ellison's last week with some interesting business associates, and I couldn't help overhearing something about clean money." The change in Victoria's demeanor was immediate. Her posture stiffened, and something cold flashed in her eyes before she forced a laugh. "Eavesdropping now? That's a new low, even for you." "It's not eavesdropping when someone speaks loudly in a public place," I countered calmly. "Who were those men, Victoria? What kind of logistics are you helping them with?" "Business you wouldn't understand," she snapped. "Some of us network and build real-world connections instead of hiding behind computer screens." I set down my coffee cup. "Your social media shows a lot of expensive items lately. More than mom and dad provide. More than any student without a job should have." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "You've always been jealous of me. Always wanted what I have. It's pathetic, really. Mom and dad see it too. Why do you think they prefer spending time with me?" The barb stung, but I pressed on. "I'm concerned about what you're involved in. If it's something illegal." "You know nothing about my life," Victoria interrupted, her voice rising. "You just can't stand that I'm successful, that I have connections and opportunities. You sit in judgment with your boring job and your boring apartment and your boring boyfriend, thinking you're somehow better because you earn everything." As I stood to leave, Victoria blocked my path. "If you're investigating me, it stops now. You have no idea who you're dealing with or what I'm capable of." "Is that a threat?" I asked quietly. Victoria's smile was chilling. "Just sisterly advice. Stay in your lane, Natalie. And stay out of my business." As I reached for the door, Victoria grabbed my arm. "I know you've been following me. My friends noticed your pathetic little Toyota. Stop now, or you'll regret it. And so will mom and dad." I yanked my arm away and left without another word, heart pounding. Victoria knew I was investigating her and had just threatened our parents. This was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. 2 days later, when I knew Victoria had a class according to her school schedule, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. Using the spare key our parents had given me for emergencies, while Victoria had a key to their house just because, I entered Victoria's apartment. The place was immaculate as always, looking more like a hotel suite than a lived-in home. I searched methodically, careful to leave everything exactly as I found it. In the bedroom closet, behind a row of designer shoes, I discovered a hidden panel that slid open to reveal a small safe. My heart raced as I considered my options. Breaking into the safe would cross a legal line I wasn't comfortable with. But as I examined the closet more carefully, I noticed a small notebook tucked between sweaters on a high shelf. The notebook contained what appeared to be a ledger: dates, locations, amounts, and initials. One entry caught my eye immediately. Beast G Transport, 50K, clean for MD. The date corresponded with the day after Victoria received the Bentley Continental GT. Beneath the notebook was a manila envelope containing photographs, Victoria with various men including Marcus Delgado, all posed in front of different luxury cars. On the back of each photo was a figure, presumably the value of the vehicle, and an address. My hands trembling, I used my phone to photograph every page of the notebook and the contents of the envelope before replacing everything exactly as I'd found it. In the kitchen, I discovered another crucial piece of evidence: a burner phone charging on a hidden outlet behind the refrigerator. I didn't touch it, but photographed it in place. As I carefully locked up and left the apartment, the full picture was becoming devastatingly clear. Victoria wasn't just spending money from questionable sources. She was actively participating in a money laundering operation. The Bentley wasn't just a status symbol. It was a tool for transporting cash or other valuables, chosen specifically because its luxury status meant it was less likely to be stopped by police. Back in my apartment, I analyzed the evidence methodically. The scheme was surprisingly simple. Victoria used her clean social image and our parents' respectable reputation as cover while transporting large amounts of cash. The money would then be cleaned through a series of transactions involving luxury goods, real estate, or other high-value items that could later be sold with apparently legitimate provenance. The MBA program provided perfect cover for her meetings with criminal associates. Any gathering could be explained away as networking or study groups. Her constant travel for business conferences allowed her to make deliveries and pickups across state lines. Most disturbing was the evidence that Victoria had accessed our parents' financial information. Among the photographed documents was a copy of our parents' investment portfolio statements, with certain stocks highlighted, likely targets for moving money through their legitimate accounts to further obscure its origins. This wasn't just about Victoria anymore. Our parents could face serious legal consequences if their accounts or identities were being used in this scheme, even unknowingly. If Victoria was using the Bentley, registered in our father's name, to transport illicit cash, he could be implicated in criminal conspiracy. The seriousness of the situation demanded action beyond my initial hesitation. That evening, I used a secure VPN and anonymous email service to contact the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, providing a summary of my findings without identifying myself or Victoria. I included just enough verifiable details to establish credibility, while indicating I had more evidence I could provide once I received a secure contact method. Within 24 hours, I received a response from Detective Sarah Matthews, who provided a secure communication channel and requested a meeting. After verifying her credentials, I agreed to meet at a public library the following day. The morning after my meeting with Detective Matthews, my phone exploded with notifications. Victoria had somehow discovered the extent of my knowledge. Perhaps she had surveillance equipment in her apartment I hadn't detected, or maybe one of her associates had seen me meeting with a detective. The messages escalated quickly from accusatory, "Going through my things?" Real mature, to threatening, "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into," to explicitly dangerous. People who interfere with business tend to have accidents. The final message chilled me to the bone. "Hope mom and dad have good insurance. Would be a shame if something happened to their house while you're playing detective." I immediately forwarded the messages to Detective Matthews, who advised me to continue normal activities while they accelerated their investigation. "We've been tracking Delgado for months," she explained. "Your evidence connects several cases we've been building." The next day, while I was at work, I received a call from HR asking me to come to the security office immediately. When I arrived, the head of security showed me footage from the parking garage. Victoria attempting to break into my car and, when unsuccessful, slashing my tires and scratching Snitch into the paint. "Do you know this person?" he asked with concern. "Unfortunately, yes. That's my sister. We're having a disagreement." The security team took the incident seriously, escorting me to my car and arranging for a tow service. As I waited for the tow truck, Victoria called from an unknown number. "That was just a warning," she said without preamble. "Stop what you're doing or things get worse. I've reported you for theft to the police. Told them you stole jewelry from my apartment." "Victoria, you need help?" I said quietly. "This isn't going to end well." "It's already over," she laughed. "I've arranged for some incriminating evidence to be found in your apartment." My friends are very thorough. I immediately called Detective Matthews, who dispatched officers to my apartment and arranged for me to give a formal statement. While at the police station, Victoria made her most desperate move yet. She showed up at my workplace, demanding access to my computer. Security footage later showed her screaming at the receptionist, claiming she needed to retrieve family photos from my workstation. When denied access, she became belligerent, eventually being escorted out by security. Her behavior was captured clearly on multiple cameras, showing a woman unraveling as her criminal enterprise was threatened. That evening, Detective Matthews called with an update. "We're moving on this tomorrow. Based on your evidence and our existing investigation, we've obtained warrants for Victoria and her associates. We'll need you to confirm a few final details." I spent hours at the FBI field office, reviewing evidence and planning the operation. Victoria had arranged for a major delivery the following evening, exactly the opportunity law enforcement needed. The sting operation was set for 7 p.m. at an upscale shopping center where Victoria was scheduled to meet with Marcus Delgado and 2 other associates. Undercover officers would be positioned throughout the area, with plainclothes detectives monitoring all exits. I watched from a surveillance van as Victoria arrived in the Bentley, parking near the service entrance as predicted. She emerged looking perfectly composed in designer clothes, carrying a large designer shopping bag that appeared empty, likely meant to transport cash after the exchange. Delgado arrived minutes later, followed by the other associates. As they converged near Victoria's car, Detective Matthews gave the signal. Officers moved in from all directions, announcing themselves as federal agents. What happened next stunned even the experienced officers. Victoria dropped the shopping bag and sprinted for the Bentley, managing to start the engine before officers reached her. She accelerated recklessly, nearly hitting 2 agents as she crashed through a parking barrier. The high-speed chase that followed lasted 17 minutes, with Victoria weaving through traffic at dangerous speeds, ultimately ending when she attempted to take an exit ramp too quickly. The Bentley spun out, crashing into a guardrail. Victoria was extracted from the vehicle unharmed but hysterical, screaming about her constitutional rights and demanding her one phone call. That phone call went to our parents. Detective Matthews called me shortly after Victoria was processed at the station. "She's asked to speak with your parents.
They're being notified now.
You might want to be there when they arrive." I reached the police station before my parents, giving me time to speak with Detective Matthews about how much to reveal about my role in the investigation. We agreed that transparency was necessary at this point. My parents needed to understand the potential legal implications for themselves. When my parents arrived, they looked confused and frightened. Mom was still wearing an apron, as if she'd been cooking when the call came. Dad's face was ashen, his normally confident posture collapsed into uncertainty. "What's happening? Where's Victoria?" Mom demanded of the desk sergeant before noticing me in the waiting area. "Natalie? Why are you here? What's going on?" Detective Matthews introduced herself and led us to a private conference room. "Your daughter Victoria has been arrested in connection with a money laundering operation we've been investigating for several months." "There's been a mistake," Dad insisted immediately. "Victoria is a graduate student. She doesn't know anything about money laundering." "Mr. Parker, we have substantial evidence," Detective Matthews replied gently but firmly, "including documentation found in the Bentley connecting her to known financial criminals." "The Bentley?" Mom's voice rose an octave. "That was a gift. For her career networking." "Mrs. Parker, that vehicle has been used to transport large sums of illicit cash. We found over $100,000 in the hidden compartment installed in the trunk." My parents turned to me, confusion and the beginning of anger in their expressions. "Did you know about this?" Dad demanded. I took a deep breath. "I discovered it. I'm the one who alerted authorities. The look of betrayal on their faces was immediate. You turned in your own sister? Mom whispered. She was involving you. I explained, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. She was using Dad's identity for some transactions. The Bentley is registered in your name. If she'd been caught without my warning to authorities, you could have been implicated. My parents were allowed to see Victoria briefly before her formal charging. When they emerged from the interview room, the shock on their faces told me Victoria had likely tried to manipulate them with her version of events. Victoria says you've always been jealous, Mom said accusingly as we stood in the hallway. That you made up these allegations because you couldn't stand her success. Let's sit down, Detective Matthews suggested, guiding us back to the conference room where she methodically presented the evidence. Photographs, financial records, Victoria's ledger, communications with known criminals, and surveillance footage of Victoria making exchanges. The Operation Victoria was involved in laundered approximately $3.2 million over the past 11 months, Detective Matthews explained. The Bentley was purchased specifically because luxury vehicles attract less attention at certain border crossings and checkpoints. Dad's face crumpled as the reality set in. Did she use our information? Our accounts. Detective Matthews nodded gravely. We've found evidence that your investment accounts were used to move smaller amounts through legitimate appearing transactions. We'll need to investigate whether this was done with your knowledge or through identity theft. We knew nothing about this, Mom insisted, tears streaming down her face. We thought Victoria was just networking for her career. The good news, Detective Matthews said gently, is that Natalie's early warning gave us time to document that you were likely unwitting participants. If Victoria cooperates, we can probably clear your involvement relatively quickly. Victoria was brought into the conference room in handcuffs for a formal family confrontation. Gone was the polished, confident sister I knew. Her makeup was smeared, her designer clothes rumpled, her expression a mixture of fury and fear. Tell them the truth, she demanded as soon as she saw me. Tell them how you've always been jealous, how you set me up. Victoria, Detective Matthews interjected, we have surveillance footage of you making exchanges with known money launderers. We have your ledger. We have the modified compartment in the Bentley with cash and cocaine residue. Your sister didn't set you up. You did this yourself. Victoria's strategy immediately shifted. Mom, Dad, I was manipulated. Marcus said it was just carrying packages for extra money. I didn't know what was inside. Dad, who had always been Victoria's strongest advocate, finally looked at her with clear eyes. The detective showed us your notebook, Victoria, with dates going back almost a year. This wasn't a mistake or manipulation. Victoria's composure cracked entirely.
Fine.
Yes, I moved money. But it's not like anyone got hurt. It was just cash. From businesses that wanted to avoid taxes. Businesses involved in human trafficking and drug distribution, Detective Matthews corrected quietly. The money you were just moving came from exploiting vulnerable people and selling drugs that destroy lives. Victoria collapsed into tears, finally admitting what she'd done while still attempting to minimize her role. I was just the courier. I didn't know where the money came from originally. As Victoria was led back to her cell, my parents sat in stunned silence. The family dynamics had shifted irrevocably in the space of a few hours. The golden child was revealed to be a criminal, and the independent daughter they'd taken for granted had protected them from potential prosecution. Detective Matthews outlined the next steps. Victoria faced multiple federal charges including money laundering, conspiracy, and potentially drug trafficking. Given the evidence and her cooperation level, she was looking at a minimum of 5 years in prison. My parents' accounts would be frozen temporarily while investigators determined their level of involvement, but my testimony about their likely innocence would help expedite clearing their names. As we left the police station well past midnight, my father looked suddenly aged, leaning heavily on my mother for support. "We need to get a lawyer," he murmured. "For Victoria. And for us." In the parking lot, Mom turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you come to us first? Before going to the police? Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "If I told you your perfect Victoria was a criminal?" Her silence was answer enough. The days following Victoria's arrest were a blur of legal consultations, media inquiries, and emotional reckonings. My parents returned home from the police station to find reporters already camped outside their house, alerted by police scanner enthusiasts who had heard the arrest of a woman in a Bentley described on the radio. Victoria was denied bail, deemed a flight risk due to her international connections and the discovery of a go bag in her apartment containing cash, a fake passport, and prepaid credit cards. The district attorney was pursuing maximum charges, using Victoria as leverage to get to the larger criminal organization. My parents' home was searched thoroughly by federal agents. Though they were treated respectfully, the experience was traumatizing, watching strangers go through their personal belongings, knowing they were looking for evidence that might implicate them in their daughter's crimes. I took emergency leave from work, splitting my time between legal meetings and supporting my shell-shocked parents. The family attorney, Mr. Brennan, who had previously handled only real estate transactions and wills, quickly acknowledged we needed specialized help. "This is federal criminal territory," he explained during our first meeting. "You need someone who specializes in white-collar crime." He recommended Catherine Alvarez, a former federal prosecutor who now defended clients in similar cases. Her retainer was steep, $50,000 up front, leading to the first of many financial reckonings. "We'll have to sell some investments," Dad said quietly as we left Ms. Alvarez's office. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The same investments they couldn't liquidate to help with my student loans were now being sold to defend Victoria. Within days, my parents' social circle began to contract. Friends who had been fixtures at their dinner parties for decades suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid conversation. Dad's golf buddies found reasons to reschedule their standing tea time. 25 years in this community, Mom said bitterly, watching through the window as a longtime friend pretended not to see her wave. "All it takes is one scandal, and they scatter like roaches when the light comes on." The financial impact was immediate and severe. Beyond the legal fees, my parents discovered their accounts would remain frozen for weeks during the investigation. Victoria had indeed used their personal information to open several accounts that had processed hundreds of thousands in suspicious transactions. "We'll have to sell the house," Dad announced one evening, looking around the spacious suburban home where I'd grown up. "Even if the accounts are unfrozen, the legal fees will drain us. And we need to downsize anyway." I offered my spare room without hesitation. "It's not big, but it's yours for as long as you need. No rent, just help with utilities and groceries." The look of shame on my father's face was painful to witness. "We should be helping you, not the other way around." "That's what family does," I replied simply. "Helps each other when it's needed." Moving my parents into my one-bedroom apartment was an exercise in emotional and physical Tetris. We converted my living room into their bedroom, rearranging furniture, and installing a privacy screen. My small dining table became command central for managing the legal situation, covered in documents and notebooks. The adjustment period was awkward and tense. My parents had never seen my daily life up close, my early morning runs, my late-night coding sessions, the meal prep Sundays that kept me fed through busy work weeks. They seemed surprised by the discipline and organization of my routine. "You cook all your meals for the week in one day?" Mom asked, watching me portion vegetable curry into containers. "It saves time and money," I explained, "and ensures I eat properly even during crunch periods at work." Mom looked thoughtful. "I could help with that. Cooking is something I can actually do." It was the first time she'd offered to contribute something meaningful, and I accepted gratefully. Small moments like these began to bridge the chasm between us. Dad found the adjustment harder. After decades as the family provider and decision-maker, he struggled with his new dependence. I often found him staring blankly at the wall, lost in thought. "I kept thinking about what you said," he admitted one evening as we sat on my small balcony. "About whether we would have believed you if you'd come to us about Victoria first." I waited, giving him space to continue. "We wouldn't have," he said finally. "I wouldn't have. I didn't want to see who she really was. It was easier to believe in the version of her we created." These difficult conversations became more frequent as we adjusted to our new reality. Family therapy sessions, which my parents had refused years earlier, now became a weekly commitment. Dr. Levine skillfully guided us through examining the family patterns that had contributed to our current situation. Favoritism doesn't just harm the less favored child, Dr. Levine explained during one session. It creates an unsustainable expectation for the favored child and prevents them from developing resilience and accountability. Mom nodded slowly. We thought we were supporting Victoria's potential, but we were really just teaching her that she didn't have to earn anything. The contrast between my life and Victoria's became increasingly apparent to my parents as they lived with me. They witnessed firsthand my work ethic, my financial responsibility, my healthy relationships with friends and colleagues. The independent daughter who can take care of herself narrative began to transform into recognition of my strength and resilience. Victoria, meanwhile, was struggling to adjust to her new reality. Her initial strategy of denial and blame gradually gave way to bargaining as the evidence against her mounted. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal in exchange for information about the larger operation, reducing her potential sentence from 15 years to 7, with possibility of parole after 5. Our first visit to see Victoria in detention was tense and emotional. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit, her perfect manicure grown out. But most striking was the absence of the superior attitude she'd always worn like armor. I didn't think it would go this far, she said, her voice small. Marcus said it was just moving money. Easy work for good pay. You knew it was illegal, Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. You had to know. Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. I liked the lifestyle, the respect. People treated me differently when I had money and connections. People who abandoned you the minute you were arrested, Mom pointed out. For the first time in our lives, I saw Victoria without pretense. The carefully constructed image had crumbled, revealing a deeply insecure person who had used external validation and material possessions to fill an internal void. I'm sorry, Victoria said, looking directly at me for the first time. For everything, not just this. For years of being awful to you. The apology was unexpected and imperfect, but it felt like the first honest communication we'd ever had. Over the following weeks, we established a new family routine. Dad came out of retirement, taking a consulting position with his former company to help rebuild their finances. Mom began volunteering at a community center, finding purpose in helping families in crisis. We took turns visiting Victoria, bringing approved books and letters from the few friends who had remained loyal. My relationship with Jason deepened through the crisis. He showed extraordinary patience and support, helping my parents move, joining us for therapy sessions when invited, and providing a sense of normalcy during chaotic times. Your family is part of who you are, he said when I apologized for the disruption to our lives. I'm not just here for the easy parts. The final resolution of the legal situation came 3 months after Victoria's arrest. My parents were officially cleared of knowingly participating in any criminal activity, though they faced significant financial penalties for the negligent oversight of their accounts. The unfrozen accounts revealed the full extent of the damage, nearly $300,000 lost to legal fees, fines, and taxes on the illegitimate transactions. The family home sold quickly but below market value due to the circumstances. My parents purchased a modest 2-bedroom condo with the proceeds, accepting the dramatic downsizing with surprising grace. It's liberating in a way, Mom admitted as we unpacked boxes in their new home. All those things we thought we needed, they were just things. As we settled into our new reality, I noticed subtle but significant changes in how my parents treated me. Dad asked my advice on financial decisions, valuing my analytical approach. Mom began acknowledging my achievements, attending a work award ceremony where I received recognition for a major project. The material inequality that had defined our family dynamic for decades had been forcibly balanced by circumstances. But more important was the emotional rebalancing, the recognition that success isn't measured by possessions or status, but by integrity, resilience, and genuine connections. 1 year after Victoria's arrest, much had changed in all our lives. Victoria was serving her reduced sentence at a minimum security facility, having provided substantial assistance to prosecutors that led to the dismantling of a major money laundering network. Her cooperation and good behavior made her eligible for educational programs within the prison system. Her letters home showed a person I barely recognized, reflective, humble, and increasingly self-aware. She joined a prison therapy group and was confronting the narcissistic tendencies that had driven her choices. The therapist here says I used external validation to avoid dealing with my insecurities, she wrote in one letter. I never felt I had any value beyond what people gave me for being pretty or charming or having nice things. Victoria had formed unexpected friendships with several inmates from vastly different backgrounds. Shanice grew up in foster care and never had anything handed to her, she wrote about her cellmate. She's teaching me what real resilience looks like. There were plans for Victoria's eventual release, still years away, but no longer an abstract concept. She'd expressed interest in using her business knowledge legitimately, perhaps in nonprofit management where her networking skills could serve a worthwhile cause. My parents had settled into their new life with surprising adaptability. Their condo was small but comfortable, decorated simply with meaningful items rather than status symbols. Dad had fully embraced his consulting role, finding satisfaction in contributing his expertise without the pressure of executive leadership. I should have done this years ago, he admitted over dinner one evening. I'm actually using my brain again, not just managing people and budgets. Mom had transformed, perhaps the most dramatically. Her volunteer work had evolved into a part-time position coordinating services for families in crisis. She developed a special interest in helping parents of incarcerated adult children, creating a support group that met weekly. I understand their shame and confusion, she explained, and I can show them there's a path forward, even through this. Their financial situation had stabilized, though at a much more modest level than before. The experience had fundamentally altered their relationship with money and possessions. When Dad received a bonus for a successful project, they donated half to a prisoner education program. My own career had continued to advance. The project I'd been working on during Victoria's arrest had been implemented successfully, leading to a promotion and substantial raise. My team had expanded, giving me management experience that opened new career paths. Jason and I had taken a significant step forward in our relationship as well. After a thoughtful conversation about timing and values, he had proposed during a weekend hiking trip. Nothing flashy or extravagant, just a sincere question asked under a canopy of stars. The vintage sapphire ring had belonged to his grandmother, carrying history and meaning rather than just monetary value. My parents' reaction to our engagement news highlighted their evolution. Instead of asking about ring size or cost, as they might have with Victoria in the past, they asked about our hopes for the future and offered to help in practical ways, like addressing invitations or coordinating with vendors. More meaningful than any material changes were the new family dynamics we were carefully building. We'd established family meetings where honest communication was the priority, a radical departure from the surface-level interactions and hidden resentments of the past. Difficult topics were no longer avoided but addressed directly and compassionately. Our prison visits to Victoria had become more natural, less fraught with tension. She showed genuine interest in our lives, asking questions and listening to the answers rather than redirecting conversation to herself. There was tentative planning for her eventual reintegration, with realistic expectations and clear boundaries. Most striking was the newfound equality in how my parents treated both daughters. They celebrated my achievements without comparison and supported Victoria's rehabilitation without enabling. Birthday and holiday gifts were thoughtful rather than extravagant, focused on meaning rather than monetary value. One Sunday evening, as we finished a simple family dinner in my parents' condo, Dad raised his glass in an impromptu toast. To lessons learned the hard way, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And to the daughter, who always saw clearly, even when we couldn't. Mom added softly, and to forgiveness that gives us a second chance to be the family we should have been all along. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. The path had been painful, the cost high for everyone involved. But from the wreckage of our former family dynamic, something healthier and more authentic was emerging. The Bentley that had symbolized so much favoritism, materialism, and ultimately criminal activity was long gone, seized as evidence, and eventually auctioned by the government. In its place was something far more valuable, a family slowly learning that love isn't measured in possessions but in respect, support, and understanding. I thought about how easily this story could have ended differently, with permanent estrangement, with parents who never recognized their role in the family dysfunction, with a sister lost entirely to her worst impulses. Instead, we were all doing the difficult work of rebuilding with greater awareness and intention. As I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I sent a silent thought of gratitude to the pain that had forced us to change. Sometimes the most devastating circumstances create the opportunity for the most meaningful growth. And sometimes, the person who seems least favored turns out to be exactly who the family needs when everything falls apart. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone feeling alone in a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Hit that share button if you know someone who might benefit from this journey of family transformation. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most painful family dynamics can lead to the most meaningful growth.